hope you had a nice lunch. Those of you living in Chattanooga with us here live probably went out and got some of that beautiful sunshine. And those of you that aren't with us in Chattanooga, I hope you got some sunshine as well. So we're going to start the afternoon off with Amy Boulware. And Amy is a care manager in elder law. She is with Chambliss, Bonner, and Stoffel, an attorney firm. Her work involves serving elders and others with disabilities, oftentimes families with disabilities, and she does that through advocacy and special needs care coordination. She's got a lot of great information for you today, and she's working a storyline through it, so I'm sure you'll find it both entertaining and informative. So please welcome Amy Boulware.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Signal Centers, thank you, Marge. And I really am excited about being here today and sharing some information with everybody. And I like to start with one known fact. We are either going to die young or we are going to age. That's pretty much as far as I know, though that is a true fact. And what I have learned is that it is really important for us to talk about these issues and to really think these things through as we're doing planning. The crisis is the worst time to be thinking about planning and to be thinking about dealing with your end of life issues, estate planning, and things like that. I was actually added to the elder law and special needs team at Chambliss Center at Chambliss law firm because they found that the lawyers could do all of the legal documents. They could do all of the wills and the trusts and things like that. But then families were coming back to us and saying, okay, but now what do I do with my mom? Or what do I do with my adult brother who has a disability? And the issues were much more about the people than just documents. So what we're going to talk about today is kind of the planning of the journey. And what do we need to consider as we are thinking about that our family members are taken care of. Okay, having a little bit of techno here. The moment. So first I wanted to just kind of address, and we had a couple of speakers who addressed some of these things this morning, but so I'll go relatively quickly through this. But one of the things that we know is that people are living much longer and that we are expected to see the 85 plus population exponentially grow by between 2020 now and 2060. Now, interestingly, I've worked in geriatrics for quite a long time. I know you're thinking, I look so young, how's that possible? But the truth of the matter is that I've been working in this field with people with disabilities and elders for the last over 30 years. And one of the things that I have learned is that we're not really dealing with people specifically about their age. I like to look at people in terms of their abilities and what they can do. I tell people all the time, I work with go-go's, I work with slow-go's, and I work with no-go's. You can be a no-go in your 30s or 40s, 60s, and a go-go in your 80s. It's really not about the age that you are. It's about what your abilities are and what you're able to do and what you cognitively and physically are wanting to do. So one of the things that we know is that the baby boomer generation So these are the folks who blew the top off of the diaper industry when they were babies, are now going to be blowing the top off of the brief industry on the other end. This is now crossing. We are going to have more elders than we have young people. This is great if you are a geriatric social worker. It means you have job security. However, we as a society are not particularly prepared for dealing with this, what they call the silver tsunami. So we need to be addressing the issues of aging in a very proactive way. I prefer to be proactive than reactive. We also know that in the population percentage of people with disabilities, 1 in 5. How do we define that? We've been talking about that all day, right? Interestingly, a lot of people like to look at aging, just the fact of aging, as a diagnosis. I had a client who gave me the best answer ever when he talked to a doctor recently. He went in because his knee was really hurting him. He was having difficulty with his knee. And the doctor said to him, "What do you expect? You're old." And the man looked at him and he said, "You know what, doctor? This knee is the same age as this knee. So maybe it's not just about the age of my knee. Let's talk about why this one's hurting and what I need to do in order to be able to walk better." But many times people are assuming that age is a diagnosis. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, it is not a diagnosis. There are disabilities that come with aging for some people, most people. So I'm going to talk about a family, okay? So you're going to go through a journey with me today. I'm going to talk about John and Jane. John and Jane are professionals. They both are retired. They're in their late 70s. Jane is 76. John is 79. They have 2 children. They don't want to talk about planning, what's going to happen when they're not here, what do we do? It makes them nervous. How much money they have, they don't want to bother their children with it. They decided to just do an I love you plan. What's mine is yours, what's yours is mine, all is good, everything's fine. They did their documents when their children were underage, when their children were something like 20 and 16, and they really haven't looked at their plan since then. Nobody wants to talk about that stuff. It's uncomfortable, right? What's going to happen when I die? What I find is that when we're actually talking about dealing with elders, is that it's not just about what happens when somebody dies. It's about the journey as they are aging and what kind of care and things that they would need. Well, here's what they didn't talk about when they were doing their planning. They have a son, his name is Carl. He has Down syndrome. When he was born, there was an expectation that people with Down syndrome live to be a certain age. Guess what? People with Down syndrome are living often much longer, but we are also seeing people with Down syndrome then being diagnosed with things like Alzheimer's disease and dementia. I will tell you that as a parent of a child with a disability, that from the point at which your child is either born with a disability or acquires a disability like mine, you worry about what's going to happen if you are not involved in somehow helping. It's on your mind. Many folks don't know what to do, and so they just let it go. We actually are seeing a lot of very elderly parents of adult children with disabilities who have maybe taken care of their adult children with disabilities their whole lives. And now they are sick themselves and needing care. And we're going to talk about this. I'm going to go through this family scenario. They also have a daughter. She's a professional, went to college, has a degree. She lives out of town. She doesn't live where they live. She's very busy. She has her own family, her own children. They didn't really want to bother her with being in charge. So what's the concern here? What do I think when I see a family like this? Well, here I'm going to throw in another wrench to this family. When they did their plans, they actually did name somebody to help in the event that they weren't able to do it themselves. They named John's brother. John's brother happens to not have had regular contact with them in about 2 years. He wasn't available when they needed it because, oh, I forgot to tell you, Mom recently had a stroke. Mom recently had a stroke, and she was the one who had been handling all of the financial issues in the family because Dad just never did it. That wasn't his role responsibility in the family. All of a sudden now, we're looking to who was appointed by these folks, and they appointed this brother who now won't talk to their daughter, Shirley, about what's happening. He stopped responding to calls. And they suddenly find out when Shirley, because the adult daughter now is kind of stepping in. She's come in from out of town. Mom had a stroke. She's in the hospital. They're dealing with Carl. They're dealing with all these different issues. Everybody's involved right now. And all of a sudden, Shirley, their daughter, starts looking at bill paying and starts looking at things that weren't being done that they thought was being done. They look at the bank account. And this brother-in-law, who they had named, who legally was able to get into their accounts, had been sliding money out. Now, I will tell you that the majority of financial exploitation of seniors is actually familial, family members who are doing it. Scary as that may seem, this is the truth. So the first point I want you to think about, and I want to talk about, is when you are naming people, you need to make sure that the person that you name in charge of either you as a person, a power of attorney of your person, or of the finances, is actually somebody that you trust and that understands and knows your business. Because a crisis can create all kinds of chaos, not to mention the financial exploitation that happened in this family. I mention that because I've recently been dealing with numerous families that have this situation, so I just put it in there. So on top of dealing with the crisis of Mom having had a stroke, dealing with the adult brother with Down syndrome, Dad seems to be not moving physically as well. He's had a hip replacement and a knee replacement, and suddenly, where all of them together were managing, I kind of call it everybody knows about the game Jenga, you know, where you pull out a block. So their lives were like a Jenga tower. And one block comes out, okay. Another block comes out, okay. Now we've got the third block, Mom has had a stroke. And suddenly this world is unhinged, and we are dealing, and the person who is now kind of coming forward is an adult daughter who doesn't live in town, has her own job and her own family, and she comes into chaos. So when I talk to families about doing planning and figuring out what the next steps are, what are the things that we are looking for, and what kinds of conversations do we recommend that people have? The first thing we want to do when we work with a family in a holistic kind of way is we gather information. I tell people we get into their business. We gather information about health and wellness, what doctors you're seeing. Is there a military veteran? There could be benefits available for individuals if they need care, elders if they need care. What's the contact information for all the family members? Is there a personal and a financial situation? Had they indicated to us that Brother John might have had some financial issues, gone bankrupt 2 times, and not really handled his own affairs well, we probably would have recommended he would not be the right person to appoint, right? I use my own family as an example on this situation. My parents were married for 48 years. Mom married my dad when she was 19. Good, long, solid marriage. My mom had cancer 3 times. The 3rd time the cancer came back, she called me up and she said, and my parents had they had done their planning. My mom was my dad's power of attorney for finances and healthcare. And dad was hers. My mom called me up one day and she said, I've got to see you, Amy. I need you to come. We spoke every day. We saw each other regularly. I said, okay. We go to her house. She says, hey, we need to go into the office. We go into this extra room. We close the door and she says, I need to take Dad off my power of attorney. I said, what? She said, Amy, he won't do what I want. Now, she was talking about her healthcare agent. She had made decisions about how she wanted to be cared for and what her healthcare decisions should be. She had fought that cancer. But by the time it came back the 3rd time, she knew that it probably was not going to end well. She also knew that my father was an extremely emotional person, that given the chance to do anything, something, whatever, he was going to want to do it in order to keep her alive. Those were not her wishes. She had specific wishes. So of course we had to talk to Dad. We had to sit down. We had to have that conversation. He starts crying. He tells her, you know what, you're right. You're right. We went, had the documents changed. She asked me to be her power of attorney of healthcare. Now, I will tell you that even at that moment, I never thought there was going to be a moment when she wasn't going to be able to make her own decisions. I didn't think there would be. But there was a day when the cancer actually went to her brain, and the doctors were telling us that the next thing they recommended was putting a shunt in her head and bathing her brain in chemotherapy. Now, I had taken care of her throughout all the others. I had helped bathe her and dress her and knew what that was like before when she was otherwise healthy. So the first question I asked was, will this bring her back to us? Because she already was not herself. She couldn't speak, she couldn't interact, we were feeding her, all of these things. And of course, the doctors Couldn't say, well, they could give you a couple more months. It could give you this. I said, I didn't ask that. I asked, will it bring her back to us in a quality of life that she indicated she wanted? They couldn't answer that in a way that satisfied us as a family. And we admitted her to hospice and brought her home, which is what she wanted. But you know what? She knew my dad. She knew my dad so well that she knew that if he was given that choice, he would have said, put the shunt in her head and give her the chemotherapy in her brain. So it's extremely important that we understand that who we name and how we communicate with them is very important. We often see people name, their brother, their adult, their oldest son, when that person may not be responsible or may not know what you want. These are folks you're appointing to act in the event that you are unable to act. What is the financial and personal situation that you have going on? Who are your advisors? Have we talked to them? Have we communicated with them? Many people like to keep all of this information close to their chest, but when a crisis happens with aging, often the whole tower starts to fall apart, and that's not the time to try and gather this information. We look at detailed breakdown of assets, fixed income versus long-term care insurance, versus, what kind of Social Security or pension you have, those kinds of things. Because this is not a one-time deal as people start to become more impaired as they age. So let's talk about this plan for this family. Had we done it properly? Had they come to us and we really talked about all of the pieces? The first thing we want to know is what's going on with the money? How their adult son with Down syndrome has lived with them their entire lives. They have cared for him. He lives in their home. They make sure he goes to day activities. They transport him, all of those things. What happens when they're not there anymore? Who will be in charge? Who makes those decisions? Should they just make some decisions about his housing and care before they become impaired, before they pass away? It's really important to, at this stage of the game, to simplify those kinds of things. Make sure that the accounts, you don't have as many accounts. You're aware of long-term care status. What kind of care might you need if you needed care as a parent? So I will tell you that long-term care planning is very complicated. Many people assume that Medicare will pay for assisted living or long-term care. This is not the case, and they don't realize it until they're in it. Part of that is having the incapacity documents in place. Financial power of attorney, we talked about that. Healthcare power of attorney, also your advance directives, how you want to be treated. Do you want it to be aggressive? Do you not want it to be aggressive? What do you want? Hospice care? What kinds of things you want? Do you want what's called a do not resuscitate? Those are all conversations that need to be had, and that's a whole workshop in and of itself. But it's important to know that these are issues that have to be discussed. How many people do you think Americans want to age in their own homes? When asked, 88% of people say they want to stay in their own homes. Is the home accessible? Are you able to get into the bathroom? Are you able to get to the garage? I just talked to somebody yesterday who has now fallen 3 times in her own home, and she's broken bones in many different places. Are we thinking that that house is the most appropriate for her? Now, I'll tell you that people can fall anywhere. You can fall in assisted living, you can fall in a nursing home, you can fall anywhere. But addressing the accessibility. So this is kind of where people, when we're talking with, folks who have pre-existing or lifelong disabilities, they may be ahead of the game when it comes to having an accessible home if their disability happens to be physical and they use some kind of adaptive equipment. It is super important to also simplify the housing situation. I cannot tell you how many clients I have worked with who have fallen while taking the giant garbage can up the driveway. Something they've done a million times, something they've done, throughout their lives, but suddenly that becomes the thing that impacts their ability. I just 2 months ago got back from taking care of my mother-in-law, who lives in a rural community. She lives on a farm. I have begged her, we need to get a lifeline for you, one of those alert systems. My husband and I will pay for it for you. We will make sure you get it. We'll do everything you need. What we were told was, don't waste your money. I carry my phone with me all the time. I don't need it. Well, it was 19 degrees outside. She was taking her dog, who happens to be extremely disabled, carrying her dog out. She fell on ice, broke the ball of her hip completely off, took an hour and something to drag herself into the house, and then couldn't make it to the phone. Laid there for over 4.5 hours until another family member found her. Do you know what she told me? She heard my voice in her head talking to her, and my voice was saying, boy, that might have been a good thing for me to have listened to Amy and gotten that life alert. The thing is that a lot of times people are so fearful of aging that they are, I've coined a term, I call it malicious independence. The desire to remain independent is so strong that people are willing to do things that are just not safe. Many people are worried about the other spouse. I'm not going to do for myself because I have to take care. We find that caregivers are often the ones falling apart before the person they're caring for. Are there ways to prepare for paying for care or assistance? There are things that are out there that are called Medicaid compliant trusts. There are plans that can help assist with understanding the cost of future care. And it's important to know what the tools are, because there can be times when it's too late to make the plan. We've had many times people say, well, I'm just going to put all of my assets in my child's name, and then I will be eligible for Medicaid services, and that'll pay for my elder care. There's a 5-year look back period. You get penalized if you do that kind of stuff. So it's important to know that the potential for this is coming, and we have to plan for it. If you have a child with a disability, a lifelong disability, there are tools that can help preserve assets and finances for that child and also make you eligible at the same time. Understanding, what does Medicare pay for? What does it not? What is a private pay? In most instances, for things like assisted living or senior independent apartments, those are private pay. Unless you are very poor or have low resources or extremely wealthy, it is going to be in the middle there of private pay for that level of care. If somebody wants in-home care, round-the-clock in-home care, we are looking at $200,000 a year. Most people cannot afford that. The annual cost of nursing home care in the state of Tennessee is $94,000. I know people are looking at me going, what? For many folks, as we age, we get into what I call the medical model. The medical model is, you know, you have the broken hip, you fix the hip, you go to rehab, you then go to outpatient, then you go home and maybe have home health, and it's all about the hip. What I find is that it's never just about the hip. It's often about many other things. Are the people eating properly? Is their house accessible? Do they have interactions with others? Are they going to the doctor on a regular basis? It's many different things that are involved. And so it's important to have the conversations with people about, as they age, what kind of care do they want? Do you want aggressive care? Do you want to have everything done and, you know, be in the ICU and all of that? Or do you want a more palliative or symptom management approach, hospice care at home? These are personal decisions, but it's important to have the conversation. And many times we have folks who say to us, I don't want to have every day of my life going to the doctor's office at this point. I'm ready to slow that down. But they get on that path and nobody's advocating for them to kind of slow it down. The most money spent by Medicare on elders is in the last 18 months of somebody's lives. And most of the time, that money that was spent will not prolong, or it might prolong, but it will not give them quality of life. They may live longer, but not necessarily with quality. I'm a big proponent of looking at more palliative or symptom management as we age. So what are the things we have to do for Carl? You know, they have this son with Down syndrome. We needed to be talking about benefits attainment way back when he was 18. At 18, he's able to be eligible possibly for some Social Security benefits on his own. At the point at which his parent, the higher earner, starts taking their Social Security, then he will be eligible for benefits off of his parents' work record. If he doesn't have a work record of his own, he will be eligible for Medicaid and Medicare. These are things that can help with paying for Carl's care when mom and dad are no longer here. And then whatever they have left over can then supplement what the public benefits are that are available. Did we need to be talking about conservatorship? Does he need somebody to act on his own behalf? Who is the backup person to speak for Carl when his mom and dad are no longer alive? We had that happen recently with somebody. He was appointed, and suddenly this guy was like floating out there, and nobody was appointed to be in charge. What kind of care coordination, quality of life? What looks good for him? Should we have started to talk about transitioning Carl to a more independent or supported housing while mom and dad were still alive? I have one couple, the dad passed away, mom and daughter with intellectual disabilities went to assisted living together. Then when mom passed away, the daughter was already comfortable. Daughter's now 75 and very comfortably living in an assisted living facility. We used to only focus kind of on those government benefits. What are they? How do we access them? What do we do? Now we really want to focus more on what does a life look like? What does quality look like? And it's tailored. What's quality for me and my family may be very different than what's quality for somebody else's family. So there are some very important tools, and these are letters and numbers and things like that I don't expect anybody to remember or really understand the specifics of. But what I want people to understand is that there are ways for parents of children with disabilities to prepare so that they can access public benefits that are out there, as well as putting money away for what's called a supplemental needs trust. These things are allowed and available because those who make our laws understand that a child with a severe disability may need that level of support for the rest of their lives. So there are ways to save and put things away for those children, adult children with disabilities. And there are a number of different ways to do that. I have a daughter who had a traumatic brain injury when she was in high school. She was a junior in high school. She has gone through all kinds of therapy and treatment and rehab and all of that. And she is doing amazingly well. I mean, I can't even tell you how excited we are about that. But when my husband and I recently did our planning, we planned for a special needs trust underneath our will in case something happens in the future. If she never needs it, it doesn't get funded and we don't use it. But it's there if it happens and she needs it. We understand that she had a significant brain trauma and something could happen in the future. So quickly, and this is just a little detail, there are some special things that have been set aside for aging parents of adult children with disabilities who have had the disability before a certain age, where if mom and dad need Medicaid benefits, then we are able to move funds into a special kind of trust without that 5-year look back. Remember, I told you can't just give all your stuff to your child, your child, so you can get on benefits unless you have a child with a significant disability. And there are rules associated with that. But there are some specific rules that you got to go to the folks who know what these rules are. We now have opportunities for people with disabilities to save for themselves. We have ABLE accounts that are out there. These are amazing tools that are just like the 529 plans where parents may be saving for college for folks. These are similar kinds of plans that are investments. And people who are on low-income benefits like SSI can still have some savings. And this is a way to do it. Again, talking about those conservatorship, guardianship, incapacity documents. I just had somebody last week say to me, My daughter has cerebral palsy. She has significant physical disabilities, but she's got a 4.0 and she's going to college. And her neurologist keeps telling us we need to do conservatorship. And the mom said, I don't understand. And I said, I don't know your daughter, but from what you're describing, I don't understand either. Conservatorship is something that takes away the individual's rights to make decisions on their own, and it puts somebody else in charge of making those decisions legally through the courts. It is a court process. Incapacity documents are those things that are power of attorney, where you still have your rights, but in the event you're not able to, then the person you've appointed makes those decisions. So that's the kind of thing that this mom probably needs to do. She said, I help her with healthcare decisions. I said, well, maybe she needs to be appointing you her power of attorney. Everybody needs a person appointed from the point at which you are 18 years old. You are considered an adult, and parents do not have the legal ability to make those decisions in healthcare and other places. And so when my children turned 18, we did this. Now, I know I've raised two 18-year-olds. 18-year-olds are not really adults, probably, in the sense of what we're thinking, but in the sense of the legal system, that is the truth. If you remember nothing else about what I talked about today, you need to go home and think about who you want to appoint for yourself and make sure you do it. It does not take away your rights. It just gives somebody the ability to act on your behalf if you are unable to. People are allowed to make bad decisions. We all are. This is not about that. This is about your ability to act like in my mom's circumstance. So again, when we talk about these things, it's like two roads, you know. Is there mental capacity, physical ability? You know, what are we talking about here? And that's a conversation that has to be had. I think it's crucial to include a circle of support. And this is a term that people who work in the disability field talk about all the time. I think we should all talk about circle of support. Who are the people who are involved, who need to be part of the adult child with a disability circle of support, the aging family member circle of support? We now live all over the place. I have a brother who lives in Texas, a sister who lives in Kansas, and I live here. Where do you think my parents and grandparents chose to move when they retired? Chattanooga, Tennessee, where their own personal geriatric social worker lives. Of course, they moved here. And the reality of it is that we have created that circle of support around them, but it's not just me, it's other people. So in a circumstance like Carl, we're gonna have met with Shirley ahead of time. She's gonna know what's expected of her, that mom and dad have appointed her now. She's going to have gone to court with conservatorship and be named as the backup person. Shirley's gonna have access to the bank accounts and know that the bills are being paid, because mom has had a stroke and dad has never done it. We're going to make sure that Carl has those benefits that he is eligible for. All of this is a foreign language to most people. And what happens is that when the crisis happens, you can't understand the language at all. So in this instance, it's been discussed, it's been planned, it's been revisited, and everybody knows what's going to happen. Doesn't mean a crisis isn't going to still happen, but at least the pieces are in place. All right. Do we have any questions? Okay, and I left my questions over there. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you so very much.